Welcome to Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we're taking a longer look at an automation and its impact. This is a hot topic right now because the hyperbole around AI has reached a fever pitch, and I'm ready for somebody to lead me out of it. I think the person for that task is Bobby Eubank, CFA. He is a thematic research analyst at Chevy Chase Trust, and he is here to help us see clearly through all of the issues here. And prior to Chevy Chase Trust, Bobby worked at Blue Point Investment Management and Heritage Financial Consultants. He graduated from Towson University. I would add, he graduated summa cum laude. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Now, you all have done some excellent deep work into the impact of automation, and also some of the longest term work I've ever seen. So, and you call it next generation of automation. So, can you please tell us what that is in your own words?
Sure. So automation's been happening since the Industrial Revolution is how we think about it. Henry Ford's assembly line was a little over 110 years ago. The first robot, used in automotive, of course, was a little over 60 years ago. The first robot was closer to that invention of the assembly line than it is to today. This is a trend that's been happening for a long time. So we wanted next generation. What are the technologies that are new, that are accelerating productivity?
Okay. As you said, you've taken an exceptionally long look at this. Where did your analytical research into this start in that continuum that you just laid out?
Chevy Chase Trust does thematic investing. We're constantly looking for new themes. Believe it or not, this specific theme, we were reading a Wall Street Journal article, if I'm recalling correctly. This was 2012, 2013 timeframe. And there was an article about technology being used in the automotive space that was applicable in the aerospace industry. And it piqued an interest. Okay, if it's possible to be use this technology in aerospace, are there other industries? Did some work, found a host of industries that potentially could use adjacent technologies to this technology being used in the automotive industry. Is this big enough from an investment perspective to put some capital behind it, of course, is the real question. And we thought yes. So that was the genesis for the theme. We're looking for three things. We look for investability. Is there enough market cap out there? Will investors recognize that opportunity in a reasonable time period, 3 to 5 years? And will the benefit accrue to corporations rather than simply just to consumers? Of course, we all want the benefits to accrue to consumers, but the companies need to be profitable as well.
Right. And so, as you looked at all of this data, I wonder if you saw a preponderance of anything. This is something I've wondered about with AI. Is is the impact on operational expenses and a decline in operational expenses? Is it about growth? What is it? Where does it really lead us to?
I would say the number one thing that when I bring up this theme to people is, well, what are we all going to do with our day 10 years from now? We're all going to be unemployed. The unemployment question, I constantly get. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. It's something on the order of 90% of us worked in agriculture
Right.
150 years ago.
Right.
Somehow we found new jobs,
Yes, we
right?
did.
So I'm a little less concerned about that one in the long term. Of course, in the near term, there will be industries disrupted
Yep.
by AI and by automation at large.
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, so let me just add something there too. So, if any of you, and I know some of you all have subscriptions to The Economist, about 4 or 5 years ago, The Economist did a really interesting research piece on what has happened during historical technological leaps. They positioned it around technology as a whole, and what they found was that most jobs were untouched. A few jobs were removed, but the one thing that happened at every juncture over that time was higher skills were required. So good news for CFA charter holders who spend a lot of time skilling up and do in other ways too. That's where we're going. But I guess I'm thinking about this from a balance sheet perspective. So over the time frame you looked at it, has this new generation of automation impacted operating expenses more than actually creating new business lines? Or is it sort of a 50-50 thing? Where does the actual balance sheet impact lie?
It's a good question. I think I've been looking at this for 12, 13 years now. The interesting analysis that I've come to is the relationship is inverse. When unemployment is low, is when companies invest in automation. It's difficult to get workers,
Right.
and business is good, so they have money to spend. And thus they invest in automation. Because the economy is doing well, it doesn't show up in unemployment statistics, even though increased investment in automation. Then inevitably interest rates get hiked in a strong economy. We have a recession. And oh, now the question is, was it the automation that caused this unemployment? We find that automation is just an ongoing fact and doesn't actually change unemployment statistics meaningfully at the aggregate level. Certainly at the micro level, it does have impacts.
Okay. And I guess, one of the things, well, this is one of those things brings up a sidebar of like, how do you calculate unemployment?
Sure. A lot of measurement issues.
Yes, it's a different podcast. But well, I guess, I'm also wondering, while it is a sort of thing that has been trebled over time, it must have booms and busts also, right? So are there others outside of just the business cycle that you just released? I gather the credit cycle has something to do with it too. Or are there other things that boom bust it?
Sure. Interest rates are it's a capital equipment purchase. These pieces of equipment usually need an integrated system. This is millions and millions of dollars of capex to install an automated line. So interest rates are extremely important for the sector. Rising interest rates, like other areas of the economy, will dampen interest in automation, given that capital expense. I would say uncertainty is a big factor. Of course, we have the uncertainty of tariffs. Where do you put your factory? Maybe you just pause, don't invest in automation right now while you think about where you should put your factory or where you should move lines. Some of the heavy truck companies invested heavily in Mexico, more recently have put those investments on pause and are evaluating, could they increase investments in South Carolina, for example. That uncertainty has put some of the capital equipment investment on hold. And then going to AI, I think this is a underappreciated facet of this big change in consumer usage of AI. Everyone feels that we're on the cusp of a big technological change. And if you're on the cusp of a big technological change, do you want to make a multi-million-dollar investment in a technology that may not yield the same benefits or may have a different technology that could provide better benefits? And so there's this uncertainty introduced by the excitement of AI. I think AI will be a big beneficiary to a lot of the companies we invest in, but it is certainly a reason to pause if you're a CFO evaluating capital and purchase. What is the future investment opportunity for my business over the next 3 years? Is that about to change? Why should I make a very large investment today? So uncertainty, I think, is a big factor right now as well.
Okay, that is interesting because uncertainty has sort of yielded an increase in strategic thinking, right? It's kind of how you have to follow it. And I completely understand the idea that you don't want to be on the bleeding edge of technology. You want to let somebody else do that. so, so that is, also, leads to the pause. Now, because most of the people who listen to this podcast work in and around the money management world, and you all are thematic investors, how do you take this theme through the work that you do as an analyst or your coworkers do as portfolio managers? How does that impact your investments?
Sure. So we have a team. It's a relatively small team, 5 dedicated analysts that are constantly searching the world for new themes. I mentioned 12, 13 years ago, simply a Wall Street Journal article on a technology being used in a new industry started a question that we explored. That's the organic process of thematic research for us, trying to identify trends that are sustainable, investable, and the profits will accrue to the companies. The analysts are constantly asking each other questions. A very famous semiconductor company, one of the largest companies in the world, we invested in years and years ago as part of our automation theme, but it was also part of another theme we had. And we came across this idea when we were talking to some doctors, and they were doing genomic research, and their biggest bottleneck was the computer processing of the intense amount of data that the human genome sequenced required. And they started using a new form of semiconductor previously used in gaming to speed up this processing. This was more than 10 years ago. And this is the type of insights we try to draw as thematic investors. We hear something, it's interesting, and we start to ask questions around that. Normally, investors in automation and molecular medicine wouldn't necessarily own a semiconductor company.
Right.
But that's a type of work that we want to do. And frankly, one that I think CFA Society members will benefit from is that automation, AI, doesn't have those type of insights. That's a uniquely human skill set for now. And I think doubling down on the skill set of strategic thinking is something that will keep us ahead of the machines.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it is an exceptionally interesting thing. I would just share that if anyone is thinking about making a trip to London, the Tate Modern Museum actually has a whole thing that's a whole exhibit that is exceptionally close to the topics we're talking about right now. They don't say words like convergence, but they were certainly in the presence of engineers and artists back as early as the 70s. And you can see them having some of the same conversations about what the blossoming of microchips meant for that. And it sounds sort of familiar too. I am old enough to remember the beginnings of the internet and how we all thought that was going to mean, email was going to be this thing that we're never going to have to, we're going to do this from anywhere. We can go on vacation all this time. And like, I don't know anybody thinks about their email like that now.
No. I view this meeting in person as a vacation, though, right?
Yeah. So thank you, Bobby, for being here on the podcast and leading us through this exceptionally interesting. And thank you all for listening. Now, if you want to hear more about what Bobby and his team are thinking, their website has a lot of details. This is where I got some of the questions from today. So that is exceptionally interesting. And if you're a CFA New York member and Bobby's voice and name sounds familiar, that's because you just saw him at our annual meeting. So until next time, I'm Rob Rowan, and this has been Compound Insights.